Welcome to the first of two videos on project management. These videos will not tell you everything you need to know about project management, but are a good jumping off point for understanding what a project manager is going to need going forward. The first thing I want to talk about are project management leadership styles. When we're talking about a project is going to have a definite beginning and a definite end, and you're going to get something new out of it, and it's going to change the organization. But to do all of those things, you're probably going to need to lead a group of people. As the manager of that project, as the person responsible for getting the project done, you're probably going to have a team of people you're working with, some people to help you reach that goal, and you're going to need to lead them. And so what kind of leadership style are you going to adopt? And a leadership style is an overall or all-encompassing framework from which you think about being a leader and will drive the decisions you make in those personal interactions. So when we talk about these leadership styles, what we're going to be talking about are overall philosophies that you might take as a leader. That's not to say that in any individual situation you might not do something or make a choice that may not fall neatly to this category. But as a general rule, you will want to be thinking about leading your team in a particular way. The first leadership style I want to mention is what we call servant leadership. A servant leader puts others first and focuses on the needs of those people in that team. In other words, his or her focus is on service to others. A servant leader is not going to be leading in a way that we would traditionally think of a boss leading. In other words, a servant leader is not going to be focused on these are the things that need to get done. I'm going to tell you what you need to do them, and I'm going to expect you to go do them, or I'm going to come down hard on you. Instead, a servant leader is going to recognize that for this project to be successful, my team needs to be successful. And my team is going to work best and already has good motivation. So they're going to work best when they are feeling their best, when they are in positions and in situations where they can naturally succeed with the talents and skills that they have. So a servant leader is really going to focus on making sure that the individuals on the team are healthy mentally and physically so that they can do the work necessary. This is in contrast somewhat to a transactional leader. A transactional leader is solely focused on the goals of the project, right? It's all about getting the project done and nothing else. And so the way that they're going to get the team to where the team needs to be is to offer rewards and disincentives for specific actions and behaviors. The mental image that I have in my head when I think of a transactional leader is I think of a military commander in battle, right? And once we're in battle, the goal is merely to take the hill. And it doesn't matter what we have to do, but we're going to take the hill. And so we will have losses, we will have casualties. People may die and people may get hurt, but we're going to take that hill because that is the goal of the project. And so I'm going to give you a reward if you do something that I think moves us toward taking the hill. Maybe that is, in the case of a project, maybe that is some time off, or maybe I'll buy lunch, or I'm going to give you a disincentive if you're doing something that isn't moving us toward taking a hill. Maybe I will threaten you with a firing, or I will, make you work on a day that you, needed to take off, or else. And so transactional leadership operates solely from getting the goals accomplished regardless of the means that we accomplish it. Now, I want to emphasize, in my discussions of servant leadership, we're still accomplishing the goals of the project. In fact, in all of these leadership styles, we are accomplishing the goals of the project. So don't think that transactional leadership is the only one that focuses on getting the project done. That is absolutely not the case. The difference is how we get there. A transactional leader is solely giving carrots and sticks, right? Do something well, you get a carrot. Do something bad, we give you the stick. Whereas a servant leadership says, look, my people want to reach the goals of the project anyway. I want to make sure that they have what they need to do that. Third kind of leadership we want to talk about is laissez-faire leadership. In laissez-faire leadership, we take a hands-off approach. In other words, a laissez-faire leader recognizes that they have really great people on their team, people who are already motivated to do what they want, people who are problem solvers, people who are going to get this job done. So rather than stepping in and quote-unquote managing them or supervising them, you basically say, look, these people are going to get the job done, and if they need help with something, they're going to come to me. So I am going to just step back and let them do their jobs. It is possible that leaders who adopt the style don't truly understand the style and think that this means they don't have to do anything. A laissez-faire leader is still active when they need to be active. They are still, from a distance, examining, finding out where problems are, making appearances when the team thinks that they're disengaged. It is not a do-nothing leadership style. It is a don't overdo things leadership style. Laissez-faire is French for let it be. And in a laissez-faire leadership style, this is generally best used when your team consists of highly motivated professionals, people who know they know what they're doing, and are good at motivating themselves, and are good at communication on their own, etc., etc. You would not want to adopt a laissez-faire leadership style in a team where there's a lot of unknowns, where the team members may not know and trust each other, where the goals may not be clear, where there are lots of decisions that still have yet to be made, and the outcomes of those decisions may need to go a specific way, or the project won't get done. But a laissez-faire leader recognizes my team has skills, my team is motivated, my people are going to get the work done on their own, and so why do I need to step in and just possibly get in their way? The next leadership style is transformational leadership. This kind of a leader is less focused on the day-to-day aspects of decision making and making sure the work gets done. Instead, their role is as inspiration and motivation to the team. And the goal is on making sure that the team is greater than the sum of its parts. And when we talk about something being greater than the sum of its parts, for those of you who, like me, have a small sweet tooth, I really like chocolate chip cookies. I think chocolate chip cookies are some of the best desserts available, especially when they're done right. You don't want too many of them, but they're awesome. And chocolate chip cookies are made up of flour and sugar and brown sugar and vanilla and maybe a pinch of salt and chocolate chips and some baking soda, etc. And so if you were to just dump all those things in a bowl, not mix them up and stick them in the oven, you don't have cookies, you have a mess. Whereas you dump all those things in a bowl, maybe you dump the wet ingredients in one bowl and mix those up, and you dump the dry ingredients in a different bowl and mix those up, and then you blend the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients and put them into small chunks and bake those, then you have a cookie, which is delicious. Still the same ingredients, but it's the way you combine them, the way you handle them and treat them, that turns them from just a pile of ingredients into cookies. And the same is true of transformational leadership. A transformational leader is going to be working on turning those ingredients, turning those workers and their skill sets and their abilities into a team that achieves more than any summation of their individual talents. That if you put someone who's really good at making schedules in charge of schedules and partner them with people who are really good at big picture and yet a third person who may be really good at the details of technical challenges, that team may function better, recognizing that they're all in their place of strength. The others respect the strengths of their team members, and so you get a what we call a synergy, which is where the entity maximizes the value of what they have. And a transformational leadership leader will, once again, kind of stay out of that dynamic of the team, except when the team needs some motivation, needs some inspiration, some reminders of how awesome they are, some reminders of how much progress that they have made toward the goal. So once again, this style of leader focuses on the team, making sure that the team is operative, but rather than like the servant leader, focusing on maximizing the team by maximizing individuals and removing barriers that may stand in the way of individuals. The transformational leader focuses on the team and how is the team as a whole performing and what can I do for the team. A lot of the best athletics coaches are transformational leaders, where they will take these groups of young men and women and by putting them in the right positions and in the right combinations, lift them up so that any deficiencies of one member are counteracted by the strengths of someone else, and vice versa, that the strengths of some of the members lift up members who may have some deficiencies in other areas. Transformational leadership is often confused with charismatic leadership, but charismatic leadership is a completely different style. Once again, motivation and energy are involved in charismatic leadership. The difference is in the area of focus. In transformational leadership, the leader is focused on improving the team through making the team better. In charismatic leadership, the leader is focused on improving the team by setting a strong example, by setting a clear message, and drawing attention to themselves. The focus is on always having a positive message. The focus is on, frankly, the leader. And so in a charismatic leadership situation, you can be something that the team aspires to be. You can be that person that the team wants to please because of your example, by the force of your personality. The challenge in charismatic leadership, because all of these leadership styles have individual challenges, is that it becomes all about you. And if for whatever reason you have to leave or step away, or are no longer associated with the project because you have become the center of the energy and the motivation, now that you are no longer there, the team founders and has a difficult time succeeding because that goal, that star on the hill, isn't there anymore. So those are some leadership styles I want you to be thinking about. However, as a leader, you're going to be doing things in a process. Regardless of the kind of project, we have a process for getting projects done. In fact, there's an entire discipline, project management, that talks about these processes as a way of ensuring that regardless of the kind of project you're doing, whether it's starting a business, sending someone into space, building a building, regardless of the project itself, the process is going to remain the same. And we break down that process into 5 groups of actions. We have initiating actions, we have planning actions, we have executing actions, we have monitoring and controlling actions, and we have closing actions. At the closing action, the project is over, which often leads to, now it's time to start a new project, and so we restart with the initiating actions. Initiating actions, or that phase of the process, involves setting the vision of what's to be accomplished. We will have a formal authorization of the project by the sponsor. In other words, the person who wants it done will say, yes, go ahead and do this thing. We will define an initial scope. This is the agreed things that we will do. And once again, in initial scope, one of the things that is commonly misunderstood when defining a project, if we say we're going to have a project revolving around starting my business, it's important to say the things that we will do. You know, we will build a website, we will find a location for our brick and mortar store, we will get financing, etc. And that is part of defining the initial scope, the things that we will do. It's also critical to define the things that we won't do. So for example, in starting a business, I'm not probably going to immediately look for acquisition targets, right? I'm not going to look for other businesses that I can buy when starting this business. I'm not going to look immediately into moving into new markets. And the reason that that is just as important as defining what you will do is because projects tend to have something called scope creep, meaning that these are the things that we agreed to. And in a project, you're going to have 3 things that you need to pay attention to as the project manager. The scope, the things that you said you were going to get done, the promises you made essentially. The budget, how much money you're going to spend, how much time that you have to get things done, etc. And then the schedule, the final parameters of when the project is due. We're going to start on this date and we're going to end on that date. And so as a project manager, you're constantly keeping your eye on those 3 things. And scope creep is the tendency in projects where people will come to you with what appears to be a little change. And they'll want you to do just something slightly different that, in their mind, may not affect the overall goal of the project. Look, I know we agreed that originally we were going to paint all of our products blue, but you know what? I really like red. Can we paint them all red? Or, you know, our biggest customer really wants red. Can we paint just theirs red? And we may be thinking, well, that's not a big deal, right? It's just a change of a color. However, in that change of color, perhaps I've already bought the blue paint. Perhaps it takes me a while to clean out the painting tools to clear the blue out and put the red in. There may be additional costs, there may be additional delays to the schedule that from what the requester may not seem like a big deal, but maybe something that is fairly complicated in the long run. So in this initiating process, when we are defining the scope, it's important to very clearly define these are the things we're going to do, and these are the things we're not going to do. We are explicitly not going to do X, Y, and Z. The last thing you do in the initiating phase is identify the stakeholders. In other words, who is going to care or who is going to be affected by the success or failure of this project. Now, obviously, the person asking you to do the project is going to be affected. The people working on the project are going to be affected. But sometimes your stakeholders may be less obviously affected. There may be people in other departments of the business who will be affected. Customers may be affected. Suppliers may be affected. So in this initiating, think of it as planning phase, you're really kind of setting out, if we do this project, what are the parameters, what are the boundaries that we have to work in. Next is the technical planning phase, where we're going to truly lay out a plan, right? And a plan is not just a list of things that we would like. It's not a wish list. It has a wish list or things that we would like, but it also focuses on how we are going to get there. So we're going to identify the entire scope, right? We're going to have our wish list. These are the things we are going to get done. And through a process that we call progressive elaboration, by digging further and further and further into details, by knowing more of the details, we can see how the pieces fit together and how we are going to move from this list of things we would like to get done into a completed project of things that got done. And so this plan needs to keep in mind and start setting up the balance between scope, the list of things that we want to get done, schedule, the time frame we have to do them, and the costs or budget, what we can spend, what resources we can allocate to meeting those needs. And here in the planning phase, as you dig further into the details, you may find that what you have as a budget and what you have as a time frame and what you have as a wish list are not compatible. I can't get everything done by the date that this project has to be completed. Or I can't do everything that we want to get done for this amount of money that we've budgeted. And so what you will find is there is this constant balancing and rebalancing between scope, schedule, and cost. And it is in the initiating and planning phases that we set that balance, that we determine for this amount of things that we need to get done, we will have this amount of time and this amount of budget. And at the beginning of the project, before I leave the planning stage, all of the stakeholders involved will come to an agreement that yes, this is the sandbox we're playing in. This is the boundaries and parameters of what we'll be doing. We all agree we're going to get these things done. We all agree we can do it in this time frame, and we all agree that we will have this much money to spend, and we will spend no more or no less. Because that then leads us to the executing phase, the actual doing of the project. Okay, where you as the project manager are going to coordinate people and resources to get things done. You will be managing the budget here, making sure you don't overspend. You will be scheduling the people and the machinery and the tools and the resources to get things done, doing that coordination, checking off the things in the scope that say, yep, we completed this that we needed to get done, we completed that where we needed to get done. That executing phase is where you get the project done. Running kind of in parallel to the executing phase is the monitoring and controlling phase. So not only are you actively pushing forward in managing the budget, setting the schedule, checking off the things in the scope, but you're also monitoring and controlling. You are, as you say, okay, we're going to spend this much money on the contractors we're going to hire to pour the cement. You're also taking a look at, well, they started on this date and are not going to be done until that date, and that changes the overall look of the project, right? This is where you examine the individual small things you're doing and executing back to the big picture of the entire project. So if we were supposed to start a particular task on a certain date and we started earlier or later, how does that change the whole project? Does that affect other things in the project? Maybe by starting this particular task earlier than we had planned, that causes a problem for something else. For example, maybe we have to put this part together and use a kind of glue or paint or whatever the case may be, and we have to do something else to it by a different person or a different resource before the glue or paint dries. Well, if I start that early, that first step early with the glue and the paint, and the people who have to come in and do the follow-up thing before the glue or paint dries aren't available until the original plan date, my starting early may throw off my entire project because My other resources can't come up to meet that earlier date. Similarly, if I start something late, maybe another step that is reliant upon the first step getting done was only available on a certain date. And if we start task A late, the people who were going to do task B, which you can't do till task A is done, aren't available anymore. They've moved on to something else. And so here in monitoring and controlling, in addition to the small detail pushing forward things that you're doing at the executing level, you're also stepping back and taking a look at the big picture here at the monitoring and controlling phase, where you're taking a look at overall project impact of the changes that you're making. The final phase, the final process group in a project is what we call closing. And this is where, just like at the beginning in the initiating phase, where we kind of all agreed that we were going to start and move forward, here is this part of the project where we all agree, yeah, we're actually done. Now, sometimes the closing can be really simple. You checked off all the things in your scope, you came in under budget, or maybe right on budget, and you were done at the date that you agreed to be done, right? If your plan comes through exactly as you laid it out at the beginning of the project, then closing is theoretically pretty easy. Everyone goes, yep, that's exactly what we ordered. It was done on exactly the date we wanted it to be done, and we spent the exact same amount of money, and it's probably pretty easy for everyone to go, good job. However, what if you're done early? What if you're under budget? What if you're late? What if you're over budget? What if you didn't get everything done? In those instances, which, let's be honest, are the vast majority of instances, closing can become more of a challenge. Will the customer say, you know what, I wanted these 20 things, but I only had this much budget in this much time, so the fact that you only got 18 done, that's fine, we're done. We'll do those other 2 things later. Or, I wanted these 20 things done by this date, and you were working great in the right kind of schedule, but we just ran out of money. So there are lots of things that can challenge getting the group to understand we are done with this project. One of the things about a project is it has a definite beginning and it has a definite end. The definite beginning oftentimes is pretty easy. The definite end can sometimes be a challenge, because one of the things we want to do in this closing phase is not just get everybody to agree we're done, but to go back and do some sort of a debriefing. What did we do well? What did we not do so well that the next time we do this project, we need to make sure we don't do those things again? We need to celebrate the work that we've done. We need to release the team to go back to the other things that they were doing before. It is critical to close a project well, and honestly, so many times projects, quote unquote, fail, not because they didn't get anything done or didn't achieve anything, but because they never technically end. They just keep going and going and going, and oh, fix this thing and add this new feature, and that's not a project. That's a quagmire. A project should have a beginning and an end. And so coming to that agreement that we are done, these are the things that we achieved, these are the things we did well, these are the things we'll change next time because we didn't do them so well, that's critical to the success of the project. As a project manager, you are going to have certain knowledge areas that you will need to have a good control of to be a good project manager. You're going to have certain skills, certain abilities to be a good project manager. A good project manager should have some skill and ability in all these areas. Obviously, there may be some areas that you are more skilled at than others, but you need to have at least some talent in all of these things. Number 1, integration management. Can I take lots of different things that individually don't care about each other and coordinate them in such a way that they work for the entire group. Building a building is a great example of the importance of integration management. If you're going to build a building, you need a foundation, right? The footings of the building where that the building is going to sit on so it doesn't sink into the ground or fall over or whatever the case may be. You're going to have walls that need to be built, painted, etc. Maybe electrical or plumbing put into those walls. You're going to need furniture, right? There's all sorts of things that go into building a building. And there's a specific order you have to do those things, right? You can't start painting walls that don't exist and don't sit on a foundation. You have to pour the foundation first. You have to then frame the walls. It's a really good idea after framing the walls to put the electrical and the plumbing through before you put the drywall on or whatever the facing of the walls is going to be. Then you paint, then you bring in the carpet, then you bring in the furniture. There's a very specific order. And most of the time, you're not having the same people do all those things. The people who pour your cement are not the electricians, who are not the painters, who are not the interior decorators. And so for their businesses, the people pour the cement don't give two shakes about the electricians, who don't give two shakes about the wall painters, unless those people are interfering with what they want to do. So your job as a project manager is to figure out, how do I coordinate these things so that they show up at the right time, interact with each other in positive ways, so that the project moves forward in the pacing and in the budget and scope that I need it to. Second of all, you're going to need some scope management skills, some ability to say no, right? At the beginning of the project and then initiating and planning phases, we agree this is what the project is going to be. These are the things we're going to do. These are the things we are not going to do. And so one of your jobs as project manager is to make sure that the things you agreed to do get done, but also that the things that you agreed you weren't going to do don't get done unless there is a renegotiation of the entire project. It's okay for the customer to say, you know what? I know we agreed to do these list of 20 things, but there's this 21st thing that I need, or I need a change to number 15. It's okay for them to say that if they give you more time and or more money, because it is a balance. We agree at the beginning of the project, we will do these things for this money in this time frame. I agree I can get it done. You agree that's what you want done. If one of us changes those parameters, that needs to involve a renegotiation of that balance. And if you don't do that renegotiation, you have what we call scope creep. And I had mentioned this before. These are unapproved and undocumented changes to the plan. And the reason we focus on the words unapproved and undocumented is because your stakeholders and your people who want this project done are going to go back to your original plan and say, you agreed to do these things in this time on this budget, and you didn't make it. And they're not going to care when you say, yeah, but so-and-so asked us to do this other thing. They're going to say, well, where is that in the plan? Your job is to say, no, we can't do that. Or you need to give us more money, and so we'll change the plan. So as a project manager, you need to not only be able to coordinate the pieces of things you want to get done, but also make sure that you don't do things that aren't involved in the scope. You need to have some skills at schedule management, realizing that when we start this thing early or late, that is or potentially is not a problem for getting the overall thing done, right? The overall project will have a due date. And for most of the stakeholders, that's the only date that they're going to care about is the whole thing done. So your job as a project manager is to change and move and organize the schedule for all the little steps that need to go into getting to that last place. You're going to need to be able to do some cost management, right? If I have a budget of X dollars, I probably have an initial plan where I say I'm going to spend Y of those dollars doing this and Z of those X dollars doing that. But what happens if early on we go over budget? How do I essentially make up for that in later things? And or it is always possible you need to go back to the stakeholders and say, something changed, and so we need to renegotiate the budget, right? We are currently in a global pandemic, which has affected how we get a lot of raw materials for a lot of things we do in this nation from China, and that has slowed things down. As a result, our costs in doing various things may have risen, either because we now need to expedite, we can't just wait on the natural shipping of things from China to us, we have to ask them to do it by a different means to get it here faster, and or we needed that raw material to do something with this one group and they've moved on and we need to reschedule them later. And so that may have moved things out, thus further increasing our costs. So in cost management, we not only need to make sure we're not just overspending or underspending based on the nature of the things themselves, we also need to be aware that other parameters change, scope changes, schedule changes may change our costs. And so we either need to make changes to how we're going to spend those things. Maybe we don't use as high a quality a contractor or highest quality product, or maybe we have to go back and say, look, here is what changed, here's why it changed. We need to either adjust the budget or adjust the scope or adjust the schedule. You do need to be concerned for quality. It's not just enough to come in on scope, on budget, on schedule if the thing you deliver is horrible. Because that won't make the customer happy either. Just because you didn't spend more money than they budgeted, just because you got quote unquote everything done, and just because you got it done by the specific date, doesn't necessarily mean the customer is going to be happy. There was a TV show, a reality TV show, I don't even remember what it was called, but the concept was there would be people who had houses that were not doing what they needed to do. They were really good people, and so these people would come in and they'd move them out for a day or two, and they'd completely gut their house and rebuild it to be what they needed to be. What they often found in the reality after that TV show is because it was a TV show, they would take shortcuts. And so they would build something that would look nice for the television picture, but as the family started using it days, weeks, months later, the things would fall apart, or maybe the work wasn't completely done. And so quality is just as important a job for you as a project manager as getting it done. You need to manage people, human resource management. You will have as one of your resources, one of your costs, people who have skills that you will need to get things done. How do you manage those people? Do you manage them by recognizing that they have skills and getting things out of their way? In the case of, say, a servant leader, do you threaten them and give them rewards? In the case of a transactional leader, how do you manage those people and make sure that you are getting the most value out of them? You need to be good at communications. There is nothing that will sink a project faster than poor communication. If people are doing a good job, you need to tell them they're doing a good job. If people aren't doing a good enough job, you need to tell them they're not doing a good enough job. If you are behind schedule or over budget or aren't getting the list of things done that you think you're going to need to get done, you need to swallow hard and tell the people who want this project done that you're behind or you're over budget or there are certain features they're not going to be able to have. Good communications is not only accurate, in other words, giving the correct information, but it's also timely. If I'm a day behind, one day into a 4-year project, my stakeholders don't need to know that probably. If I am 3 months behind with 3 months to go on my project, especially a long project, you're probably too late in telling them that you're behind because you probably aren't going to be able to fix it or get enough help to be able to fix it. So you're going to focus as a project manager on telling the appropriate people, because not everyone needs to know everything, what information they need, and you are responsible for getting that information, for giving that information, and you kind of become the communications hub. You need to be good at analyzing risk. This is the one skill that most people who think they're going to be good project managers fail at. Things will go wrong in your project. However, they're not all going to go wrong in the same way or at the same level. Your job as a project manager is to understand what can go wrong, how likely is it to go wrong, and what are the consequences if it goes wrong, and make appropriate actions to mitigate those risks or to lessen those risks, but also to respond accordingly when things have gone wrong. Some things will be big deals, some things won't be big deals. Someone gets the flu. If they're one person in a team of 10 who are all doing the same thing, and they're going to be doing it for 3 months, a person getting a flu and being out for a couple days, probably not a big deal. Because we've got 9 other people to help make up that work. It's repetitive work, it's going to be done over a long period of time, probably not a big deal. However, if they bring that flu into the team and then everybody in the team has the flu and gets sick, that might be a big deal. So you're actually at a bigger risk by asking that person with the flu to come into work and get their part of the work done than you are in saying, look, stay home. We'll figure this out. However, if you have another person who gets the flu and they are the only person who can do something and they are tightly scheduled into a slot where if they don't get their work done between date X and date Y, other people can't do their work, that's a bigger problem. And so the same quote-unquote problem has different levels of risk. And it is your ability to understand the true consequences of what could happen and what has happened and put them in the context of the big picture is really quite a valuable skill. One most people don't have, and frankly one that only comes with lots of experience. Because you're making these risk judgments based on things you've seen in the past. You need some skills in procurement. How do I get the people, services, materials, goods, etc., from outside of my organization to get something done? If I'm going to build a building, I know a little bit about wiring, and I can probably put up some drywall, and I probably know a little bit about pouring cement, because I've done all of those things. But I'm definitely not an expert. And I definitely don't know how to, other than Quickcrete that I can get from Lowe's, I don't really know how to mix cement. What's the appropriate combination of rock and water and sand and lime, etc. So I need to get people outside of my organization to bring those skills and talents in. And how do I do that? And how do I schedule it appropriately? And how do I motivate people who said they were going to be there on Tuesday, but now call me on Monday and say they can't show up till Wednesday. These abilities you have to procure resources for your project become critical. And I need to be able to manage my stakeholders, the people who will be affected by getting this done. Sometimes managing the stakeholders is just giving them information. Here's where we are in the schedule, here's how we're moving. But sometimes it will take some education and some cheerleading. As someone who spent his entire career in information systems, I have been involved in times when companies have brought in new information systems that are going to affect every department in the organization. And sometimes people are afraid that when something new comes in, they won't be able to perform as well as they have. And so they'll set up all sorts of roadblocks and complaints, etc. Well, this won't work. We tried that before. It won't work this time. That's too risky. We shouldn't do that. And part of your job as project manager may be getting in front of them, showing them, not just telling them, but showing them how this will make their lives better, gaining their trust. Because just building the thing or completing the project, as far as checking off the things that said you needed to have done in the scope or in the schedule provided under budget, doesn't necessarily mean the project is going to be a success, because the people still have to use it in the case of software, or people may still have to sell it in the case of manufacturing, or whatever the case may be. So managing all of the stakeholders, not just the people who are writing the checks for the budget, not just your boss who asked you to get this done, but managing all the stakeholders is an important job of the project manager. So that's an introduction to project management. In our next video, we're going to talk about sources of power. What are the skills and tools you can have as a project manager to make sure things actually get done? Not just being a leader of people, but ways to manipulate people to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do on their own, which is not necessarily a bad thing. When I was teaching my kids how to swim, my daughter took to it like a fish. My son did not want to put his face in the water and didn't even really want to get into the pool. My ability to manipulate him to do that thing he didn't want to do, swim, ended up being a very good thing, because he swam on swim teams all the way up through high school and is still an active swimmer. So don't look at the use of power as a bad thing. We're going to talk about it in use of power as a good thing, as a positive thing toward having the business and the project succeed. So thanks for watching this video. We'll see you in the next one.